Hello there, and you're very welcome to the Arkham Avengers Podcast. You join me, the host, along with Eamon, Hector, and Captain Fantastical Mick. Join us for some chat about football, crack, bold opinions, and a touch of chaos. From drama to questionable decisions, there's something here for everyone. So sit back, stay tuned, and enjoy the show. Hello there, and you're very welcome to another Arkham Avengers Podcast. Well, folks, the Premier League is nearly upon us. The fantasy football is here with us. And Mick and Eamon are with me in the studio. We've no Hector yet, so not a lot has changed there. But before we go anywhere near the Premier League or the Fantasy Football League, we have to mention that Mayo are the All-Ireland champions. After 75 years, after all of those semi-finals, the finals, all the near misses, all those journeys up to Croke Park and the journeys back home, wondering would we ever actually see it happen. It did, folks. Mayo bet Kerry. Sam Maguire has finally gone west, and judging by some of the stories coming out of Mayo since the final, I'm not entirely convinced the county has returned to normal yet.
That's right. Hello everybody, by the way. Better say hello first. I don't think everybody's returned home yet from what I've heard.
Yeah, that's another problem, Mick. You see, there are Mayo people who went out to watch the All-Ireland final, and apparently they haven't been seen since. There's families now putting up missing person posters, which basically would say, last seen on the Sunday evening of the All-Ireland, carrying a Mayo flag and saying, I'll only stay for one. And I imagine that some of those stories are improving with every telling and with every day. And hello to all our listeners. It's lovely to be back after our little break. But that's very true, Eamon. Yes, the stories are growing legs there. That's the wonderful thing, though, about the All-Ireland celebration, isn't it? I mean, on a Sunday night, you saw one of the players maybe in the pub. By Monday, you had a drink with them. By Tuesday, you were on the team bus. By Wednesday, Andy Moore had apparently asked you to give them a team talk, and by Thursday you're telling people you scored a goal and 3 points against Kerry yourself. And Sam Maguire has been apparently in every house in Mayo. That's the rumour going around now. Well, indeed, I've heard it's been in some houses twice. I've heard so many stories about people drinking out of Sam. I'm actually starting to think there must be about 17 Sam Maguire cups circling around Mayo there, because every pub has a story, every village has a story. Everyone knows someone who knows somebody who ended up somewhere they weren't supposed to be at 4 o'clock in the morning. And the wonderful thing is that nobody is remotely interested in establishing whether any of this is actually true. And you never let the truth get in the way of a good Mayo story. That's what I say there. Exactly. Well, look, after waiting 75 years, Mayo are entitled to celebrate and to exaggerate for at least the next 12 months. So congratulations to everybody in Mayo. Congratulations to the Mayo team and Andy Moore, all the backroom staff and everybody who's been on that journey with Mayo this year and for many years. And to anybody who's still celebrating, well, Godspeed to you. As far as the tall stories are concerned, I believe every single one of them, and that brings us nicely and neatly to another man who hasn't been seen around here for quite some time, and that happens to be Hector. Don't tell me he's still in Brazil. I mean, did nobody tell him the World Cup was over? Or maybe he's not coming back. Well, apparently, yes, he's still in Brazil. Although I'm reliably informed that negotiations are progressing well, and our Brazilian correspondent should be back in time for the start of the new season. Apparently, Hector has been conducting what we call extensive scouting operations while he was over there, but unfortunately he spent several weeks scouting Brazilian players who don't actually play in the Premier League, so it's pretty much absolutely useless to us.
Well, that would sound about right there. That sounds like Hector, okay, yeah. He's supposed to be doing one job, he doesn't do it, and then he's ended up doing something else there, so I still think we possibly could have grounds to keep him off the show.
No, Mick, we're not going to keep him off the show. We've already discussed this.
I'm just saying, maybe, give him a red card to say, look, you can't be on for a couple of episodes now until you get yourself back in shape and get yourself up to speed. I mean, will he know what's going on in the Premier League?
Well, I'm not sure, but that's up to Hector. And Hector, wherever you are, enjoy the sunshine. Enjoy the remaining freedom, because the Premier League is coming back and the Arkham Avengers Fantasy Football League will be coming back, and we expect you to be back in your chair for game week 1. And when Hector eventually returns from Brazil, he's going to discover that quite a lot has changed while he's been away. Isn't that right, lads? Because this is really unusual for the Premier League, I think, especially this season. At the time of recording this podcast, 9 clubs heading into the campaign with new managers. You heard it right, it's 9. That's nearly half the league. And, you know, from the fantasy football point of view, Mick, this creates a serious challenge because a lot of what we thought we knew about these teams last season may effectively be thrown out the window.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things for managers, because they've got to take account of this year. Normally when we're building up to that first squad, we've got a reasonable amount of information from the previous season and from other seasons. We know what a manager likes and how they set themselves up, and we know what players that they trust. We know who's going to get 90 minutes, which defenders are encouraged to attack, who's going to take set pieces, which player is always at risk of maybe being rotated. But with 9 managerial changes, suddenly a huge amount of that has become uncertain. You can have somebody who was one of the first names on the team sheet last season, and they might not actually fit into the new manager system. And equally, you could have a player sitting at 5 or 6 million who we barely looked at last year, and now suddenly the new manager moves them 10 yards further forward up the pitch, and suddenly we've got a completely different fantasy asset here.
So essentially, nearly half the league has become a bit of a FPL experiment. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it there. And I think patience is going to be particularly important at the start of this season. There's a temptation to watch pre-season, see somebody score a couple of goals and immediately decide you've discovered a great fantasy Premier League bargain. But with a new manager, I would want more information. I mean, I'd like to see what the formation is that they're going to use when the competitive matches start. Who's genuinely a first choice pick, who's going to take the penalties, who's on corners and free kicks, which fullbacks are going to be allowed to go forward in attack and provide assists there, which midfielder is suddenly being pushed forward to and maybe closer to being a striker this year. Those first 2 or 3 game weeks, I feel they're going to tell us an enormous amount. So that's what I would be looking at this moment. If I were a manager in the fantasy football land, I think I would be keeping my powder dry and see how things start off. And there's another complication. A new manager doesn't necessarily mean the players who were good options last season remain good options this season. Isn't that right?
Oh yeah, that's definitely the case. And that's why I'm coming back to something we'll probably repeat all season. Don't buy the name, buy the role. If somebody scored 180 fantasy points last year, but the new manager is now asking them to play much deeper, last year's points, they aren't much use to us. Likewise, somebody who scored 90 points last year could suddenly become a far more interesting option because his role's completely changed there.
So lads, what you're saying is, for the first few weeks, you're almost watching the Premier League differently, not looking at who's scoring.
Absolutely. I'm looking at positioning, a bit like what Eamon is saying. I'm looking at the minutes. I'm looking at who's getting into the box, the set pieces, as Eamon said there. I'm looking at substitutions as well. A manager, if he's consistently taking a player off after 60 or 65 minutes, that's useful information. So it is. Equally, if someone we thought was a rotation risk and he's playing 90 minutes every week, we might have a new option.
And that's where the existing managers, I feel, they're going to have to be careful with this. Experience is useful, but experience can also make you assume you already know what a player is. And this season, with those new 9 managers in place, we may have to forget about some of what we thought we knew. Okay, so that sort of gives us a rule for the Arkham Avengers season. Don't manage the new season using last season's instruction manual, something like that there. So 9 new managers, new formations, new signings, new roles, and probably 9 different ways for us to get our game week 1 teams completely wrong. But of course, it's not just the managers, is it? I mean, there's plenty of new players coming in as well here, and plenty of movement of players between the clubs. Mick, hey man, I'm handing you an imaginary checkbook. Which of the summer rivals are catching your eye? Which one of them would you say, there's a potential top player for me?
Well, for me, it has to be Zolas at Arsenal. He's definitely caught my attention, and he's coming in. He's after putting up a really impressive stack of attacking numbers there, and when you're putting an attacking player into strong side in the league already, that's getting my attention. So it is, plus he really played really well in the Community Shield there against Man City. And the one thing I probably want to know about is, whether he's going to get into those areas where he's going to get the fantasy football points. That's it. But we'll find out about that over a couple of game weeks, and just see how he's being played and how he beds in there.
So, Mick, basically what you're saying here is watch list doesn't necessarily mean buy. Well, I would say, yes, that's exactly it. That's one of the important distinctions at the start of the season is we can like a player without owning him. Give me the information first. Show me the minutes. Show me the role. Then we make a decision. What about Elliot Anderson? Big move for him. Yes, he's a very good footballer, I feel, and he shows a lot of promise. Fantasy football, though, is going to ask a different question. We did see him playing for Man City in the Community Shield. I think he needs more time to bed into the team. Depends on those around him, the feeders, how he feeds onto other players as well. If he's controlling the matches from the midfield, he's a player who could have an outstanding season. If he's getting forward, arriving around the penalty area, creating chances and getting shots away, that's a different conversation altogether. And that's something new managers need to understand.
Exactly, man. I agree with you there. A great Premier League signing isn't automatically a great fantasy signing. Fantasy doesn't give you the points for controlling midfield. We need goals. Isn't that right, Eamon? We need the assists. We need clean sheets, so we do bonus points. Admire the footballer, but you got to buy an FPL asset. That's what I say.
Okay, what about Tonali at Spurs?
Again, I think he's going to be a huge signing in football terms. But again, I'm watching this role. If he's sitting deep and controlling games, I might like just to watch him without putting him in a fantasy football team. But if he's allowed to get forward and we're seeing shots and chances created, getting involved in the box, I think managers probably need to reconsider at that point there.
That probably gives us maybe another Arkham Avengers rule. Don't buy the name, buy the role. I like that. Yeah, that's nice. With these new signings, because everyone wants a shiny new player, sometimes the boring player who is starting every week for 3 years, they can be a better fantasy pick for you. Let's imagine I'm completely new to the fantasy football. I've opened the game, I've got myself signed up, I've got this 100 million. I'm feeling incredibly wealthy. Then I've picked 3 players and suddenly realise I'm practically bankrupt. Where do I start?
I think the biggest mistake is simply to pick footballers that you recognise. You see the big names and you start putting them into the team and okay, it all looks fantastic, and then you spent most of the budget on 5 or 6 players and you end up trying to fill the remaining positions with whoever you can afford. You're not trying to select the 15 best players in England. You're trying to find the best combination of players to get your fantasy points, with the money you've got available there.
And you have to understand how players actually score points. It's goals and assists, obviously. But there's also the clean sheets there, the bonus points, defensive contributions, And again, it's back to who's taking those penalties, the corners, the free kicks. Is the defender getting forward? It's the little details like that. They're going to matter enormously over the next 38 weeks.
And before any of that, you've got to ask the basic question, is he actually going to play? There's no point finding this amazing 5.5 million bargain if the manager is going to give him 18 minutes every second Saturday.
Yeah, availability of a player and the minutes played is a really important asset, and managers need to remember this. It's not exciting, but it is hugely valuable. You can't score points if he's sitting in the bench or sitting in the stand there. Okay, so that's another one for us here. So availability, you'd say, is an FPL scale. How far ahead should I actually be looking when I'm putting my team together? I'd probably look in a block of maybe 4 to 6 game weeks. I wouldn't go any higher than that there. You need to look at the fixture swings, teams might be starting to put a run together. And you have to look at those teams who are coming into difficult fixtures. And don't plan, though, for every individual transfer 6 weeks ahead, because football can change quite a bit there. And do we have to spend all of the 100 million?
No, you don't. No. If the team I want costs 99.5 million, I'm perfectly happy with that, because you've got 500,000 in the bank, and that gives you a little bit of flexibility. You've got a 6.5 million midfielder and he's got injured, so you've got to replace him. The next player you've got your eye on, he's worth 6.8 million. So look, with 500,000 in the bank, you can make that move immediately without having to change another player someplace else, to fit him in and get the money. So, yeah, maybe keep a little bit of money in the bank is what I would say there. I think you also need to think about price point. A good FPL squad isn't simply about the players you own. It's about how easily you can move the players you might want to bring in next.
So essentially what you're saying there, Eamon, is we're building escape routes into the squad and out of the squad there.
Yes, that's what we're doing. You're planning. Don't box yourself into a corner here. Have an escape route. You've players that might have to be replaced, but you don't want to be boxed in thinking, okay, I have a player who's not performing or something's happened to him, but you don't have the capital to bring in somebody. Maybe you could bring in somebody maybe who's a little bit less than him, but are they going to do any good is the question. But you might know, as Mick said, the next player might be worth 6.8 million, but you're shy. So think about that. The flexibility of having that bit of cash there. It can be important.
I suppose another important thing for both new and returning managers this season is that's the transfers, because you're not limited, this is my understanding, to simply carrying one spare transfer anymore. Correct me if it is. You can actually build up a transfer war chest. Am I right with that there?
Yeah, you can, yeah. What you can do is you can roll your free transfers and build them up to a maximum of 5 transfers. And I think that's really important. It could be really, really strategically important to a manager, because now patience, you get a reward from the patient.
Patient is it or patience?
Patience. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. Yeah, if you're patient and you're not.
Sorry, are you talking about patients in the hospital or like you're biding your time?
I'm talking about you're being patient. You're not using your transfers every week. I'm not talking a different language here or something.
No. I just wonder, you were saying, if you've got patience, and I thought for a moment then, is this a medical show there? What you're going into?
No, I'm not starting that. If you're not using up your transfers every week, you're being patient and building them up. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to get across here. And if your team is in a decent shape, then, perhaps you don't have to manufacture a transfer just because you've got one available. Just carry it there.
And this is something that experienced managers used to do all the time. You'd look at the team and think, there's nothing really wrong here, but I have a transfer. So I suppose I better use it. But that was, of course, at the time when if you had 1 or 2 transfers, you were going to lose a transfer. But it's a different landscape now, being able to build up the 5 transfers. And, sometimes there can be real benefit from doing nothing. Keep that in mind as well, managers. So just explain that for somebody who's playing for the first time. If I don't use my free transfer this week, what happens?
Well, you're going to keep it. You're not going to lose it, that's for sure. And if you continue to leave the team alone, you're going to accumulate them until you've got as many as 5 free transfers available to use.
So 5 transfers without taking a point hit. You could use them all there.
Yeah, that's right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And this is really powerful stuff, so it is. Maybe you've identified a major fixture swing coming up, or maybe there's a double game week coming up. Maybe several teams are suddenly putting a brilliant run together, and you've looked at your squad and it needs restructuring. So instead of taking -4s and -8, you could potentially make several changes using those transfers that you have saved. So patience actually might give you spending power. That's what you're saying, lads.
And in transfer terms, yeah, absolutely. And it changes the way you should think about the game weeks. You don't have to ask, who am I transferring this week? Sometimes the better question is, do I need to transfer anybody at all?
And I always think when I'm looking at some of the activity of some of our managers in the league, quite often the answer is no. Like if your 15 players are all fit, you've got a decent set of fixtures and there aren't any obvious improvement that you think you need to make, you just roll with it. That's what I would say. That transfer might be considerably more useful 3 weeks down the line. So that's what I would say with that. That's what I would say. Okay, so let's use this example. I've been disciplined and I've somehow reached 5 free transfers. What can I actually do with them?
Well, you've suddenly got an ability to reshape a significant part of your squad. Let's say you've been carrying 2 defenders whose fixtures are turning badly, or you've got a midfielder who's lost his place and you've decided you want to restructure your forward line. Normally, that could cost you points. With the 5 transfers that you've banked, you can make those moves without taking a hit.
And you don't necessarily have to use all of those 5 transfers either. It's important, just because you've accumulated the 5 of them, doesn't mean you have to immediately spend the 5 of them there. All right, so it's like finding, a €20 note in the old jacket and immediately you're heading off to the pub. No, it's not. Although Hector would. Most likely Hector would spend the 5 transfers before the plane landed from Brazil. But look, the other thing I say is don't become obsessed with having 5 transfers all of the time. The purpose of banking transfers is to give yourself options. If there's a really good move available, make it. You're not getting bonus points for finishing this season with unused transfers.
Exactly. Patience. It doesn't mean paralysis. If your player is injured or he's lost his place, or there's an obvious upgrade, use a transfer. The skill is recognising the difference between a transfer you actually need and a transfer you're going to make because you're sitting there and you're bored.
So another Arkham Avengers rule: don't transfer because you're bored.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, this is probably one of the biggest traps that you could fall into. Your striker blanks, you're looking at another striker who scores twice, you immediately swap them, but those points are already gone. You have to remember that. You're buying somebody on the basis of what you believe he's going to do next, not what he did in the last game week. It's a bit like the FPL should flash up a big warning just as you're pressing the transfer button and with a banner here. You cannot buy last week's points. That's what you're getting at, Eamon. Yes. And, every experienced manager knows that, but still, you have experienced managers who do press that button. They react. It's the knee-jerk react there. That striker, they've lost faith in him all of a sudden. That striker, in another game week or two, could be playing really well, and you just transfer him out, and the person you brought in could be playing poorly, and you're back to square one. So just have a think about that then. Okay, tell us here, what about the dreaded -4 points hit?
A hit isn't automatically wrong. Sometimes you've got an injury or a suspension, and if you haven't got the transfers available, you're going to have to make a move that improves the team for a couple of weeks there. But look, there should always be a reason why you're taking a -4 hit.
Yeah, I do agree with Mick there, because remember, the player coming in doesn't simply need to score or get you back that -4 points. That player needs to effectively justify that those 4 points are going to be repaid, but he's also going to be an investment in the future there. That he's going to get you further points. What you don't want to be taking a -4, and the player you bring in is certainly not performing as you expected. So you've lost the -4 points, and maybe you're losing more points. Maybe the player doesn't start or comes on, get the yellow card. He's losing you points. So you have to have good rationale for the -4s. -4s, -8 points. And I always advocate this. I don't think you should be ever going higher than a -8. It should be an exceptional situation why it's a -8. I've seen managers going to -12, and I think we've seen managers going a bit higher than that. That's nonsense business. That's not just transferring for the sake of improving the team. That's panic transfer business. Because the only thing you have to remember is, those -4 points, those minus points, they add up there. So if you take enough of those unnecessary hits across the season, you're effectively giving away a serious number of points. You're losing those. Those minus points add up there. And I suppose, say for example here, you panic and you're a -12 on a Saturday morning before the deadline starts. What do?
Oh, I would turn off my phone or my laptop. I would just put my head down.
I'd seek assistance. I'd talk to somebody. You'd have to talk to somebody before contemplating that. Look, if you knew somebody that you could talk to, would that be another FPL manager?
Well, it could be, yeah. Well, Could be.
Maybe Hector? No, I wouldn't be ringing Hector now. No. Look, another thing to bear in mind is you need substitutes who actually play, but you don't necessarily want a lot of money sitting on the bench each week. Your first substitute is particularly important because injuries and rotations happen. Isn't that right, Mick?
Yeah, that's right. But if you're consistently, though, choosing between expensive players for your starting 11, you probably spread the money too evenly. So you want the majority of your budget working for you around the pitch.
And another thing is captaincy. That's very important because you're effectively doubling one player's score every week. And what I would tell a new manager is not to consistently search for a clever pick. Look at your strongest attacking players, their form, their fixture, their expected minutes. Do they take penalties? Make the decision based on that.
Yeah, because look, the best attacking player in the league, he's in brilliant form and, he's got a great home fixture. Sometimes you simply captain him, there's no choice. It's easy peasy. Boring points are still, there's still points at the end of the day there. You don't need to look for the player and you think, he's going to get me 15 points or 20 points in a match and I'm going to select him as my double captain. It doesn't always work out that way. It does for some people, doesn't work out all that way. So think logically and rationally about who's doing the business on the pitch there for you.
Yeah, I agree with Mick. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, have a think about it then. Yeah, I suppose, look, there's nothing that's going to hurt you more by you talking yourself out of an obvious sort of captain choice there, and then you watch him score twice in the league kick-off and you're wondering, why didn't I stick with him and select him as a captain? What about defensive contributions now? This aspect of the points and fantasy football makes certain types of players more interesting. Previously, you might have looked at a centre-back and think that unless his team keeps a clean sheet, is he going to do much for you with that? But now there's another route through the points, through the defensive work there. And that's useful when you're comparing similarly priced players. Who's capable of producing something even when there isn't a goal or an assist? Those points accumulate across the season as well there. So perhaps the boring centre half might not be so boring after all. What about the stock market and price changes?
Yeah, well, this is where the sensible adults begin checking whether somebody might increase by, 100,000 at midnight and that. So, look, team value matters. Building value gives you more buying power later on. But points remain the objective here. Don't get tied up or locked up with the money side of things. Don't make a bad football decision simply because you're terrified of losing 0.1 million or something like that there.
So, make points before pounds, is that it?
It's always in my book, always.
Okay, right. We might move on to this part of the Fantasy Premier League where sensible people suddenly become gamblers, and this is the chips.
Yeah, well, look, you've got 2 sets of 4 chips here. In the first half of the season, you've got your wildcard, free hit, you've got your triple captain, and you've got your bench boost. And then you're going to get the same 4 chips available for the second half of the season.
So altogether, 8 chips, that's right?
Yeah, that's right. So 8 altogether. And that's very important because the first set can't simply be saved until May. You have to use the first 4 of your chips before game week 19 deadline. Anything you haven't used from that first set, it's gone. You can't use it, you can't carry it. Then after game week 19 is finished, you're going to have the second set for the remainder of the season.
Let's take them one at a time here. So, wildcard. What exactly am I getting with this? And you get unlimited permanent transfers to that game week. So instead of changing 1 or 2 players, you can completely rebuild your squad without taking any points hits. And once that game week is over, those players that you've transferred in, they remain. They are your new team there. But the mistake is using it because you've had one bad game week. A wild card should be used to solve a bigger problem. Maybe your squad structure isn't right. Maybe there has been a major fixture swing. Maybe several players have lost their places or there's been injuries. That's when you need to think about using it. It's a powerful chip to use in those instances. It's not a case of my striker missed a penalty and I'm furious. No, it's not that at all. So it's rather a case of there's a couple of things fundamentally wrong with my squad. Maybe I should use the wild card. Yeah, that would be it exactly. Okay, free hit. Mick, what am I doing with this?
Well, the free hit also gives you unlimited transfers, but remember, it's only for one game week. So after that game week, your squad goes back to what it was before you played your chip.
So essentially, I'm borrowing a completely different team for that game week.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. So it can be particularly useful for some of those unusual game weeks. You know, maybe you've got a limited number of teams playing. There could be a fixture combination that you want to attack aggressively. You want to build an ideal team for that 1 week. Then your old team returns after week. You know, well, it might be a double game week or something like that. And you think, okay, I'll bring in some players for that there.
Let me just get this correct. Wildcard equals new permanent team. Free hit equals game week rental.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Yeah, it is, yeah.
Okay, next, triple captain. And this is a chip that's probably ruined many a game week for a manager.
Yes, well, as we said before, normally when you select your captain, the player's points are doubled. Now, with the triple captain, they're tripled. Nothing magical about that there. So obviously, you want to use it when you've got an elite attacking player in a strong situation there. And this is why managers often start thinking about the double game weeks. If your captain has 2 fixtures in the same game week, you're potentially tripling returns from 2 matches rather than 1.
No, you said potentially.
I did. I said potentially because we know this can happen. 2 fixtures, you triple your captain. The first match, he gets the yellow card. 1 2-pointer is his score. And then the second match, he's taken off after 58 minutes or doesn't play at all. And at that point, you're spending the next 3 months saying, you know, another day he would have scored there.
Interesting. Just because it's a double game week doesn't necessarily mean you'd go and triple a captain.
No, you'd have a look at their players' form and look at the fixtures. That's what I'd be looking at.
The bench boost.
Well, look, normally your starting 11 scores points for you. So the bench boost adds in the points from all the 4 players on your bench for that game week total. The key is using it when you've deliberately got a good, strong 15 players in your team. You want all 4 bench players to have good fixtures and ideally to be playing and starting in matches there as well.
So it's probably not a week where my second goalkeeper is injured and the third substitute hasn't played since September and the first substitute has gone abroad, or he's away to Arsenal or he's suspended or whatever. That's probably not my time to be playing a bench boost.
No, I wouldn't play it. I wouldn't do that now. That's a little bit extreme, so it is. Optimize benefits from the players that are playing there. Look, sometimes you won't get it right. The bench boosts, it won't always pay off. We saw that last season for some of our managers. But again, if you think you've got a player who's playing well and they've got good fixtures, if you have a couple of players there, if possible, it is worth it. Look, you're going to have to use, you don't have to, but it is there available for you to use. And it'd be a shame to let it go. But again, some managers don't avail of it. They let it go.
And I suppose the fact that you get 2 sets of chips, that probably would change the way a manager would think, would it?
Definitely, yeah, because in previous formats, managers sometimes held on to certain chips for months because they didn't want to use them at the wrong time. When you have one set in the first half and you have another in the second half, you're actually encouraged to look for opportunities to use them. So don't be afraid to use them. And if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world for you, particularly because the first set expires in game week 19. You don't want to reach December with 3 chips still sitting there and suddenly realise you've got to squeeze them into a handful of game weeks. Have a look and pace yourself out there.
Chip planning, maybe we should be starting early with that.
Yes, certainly I'd be keeping them there on the back burner. Don't forget about them there. Don't necessarily start thinking about them in August, looking at what game week that you're going to use every chip. Just remember that they're there and look ahead and look at the fixtures. Look for a double game week or that awkward week in there. But I would say use them. Don't lose them.
Another question here for a potential new manager who's starting out is, can I combine them? Say, could I have a triple captain and a bench boost together?
Oh, no, you couldn't. It's one chip per game week, so it is. So, yeah, you could only play one or the other.
All right, okay. So no super wildcard triple captain bench boost Saturday for my team.
No. Unfortunately not. No, it doesn't work like that, so it doesn't.
Okay. Here's something else that I think is interesting. What happens to the banked transfers if I use a chip.
This is another reason, saving transfers is useful, because your ability to build up to 5 free transfers gives you flexibility around chip. I'm getting tongue-tied here. The chip strategy as well. So you need to think about transfers and chips as part of the overall plan rather than two completely separate things there.
If you're building towards a wildcard and you're saving transfers, then do you need to use the wildcard? Because if you've got 4 or 5 transfers and you can solve a squad problem without using the chip at all, there's a strategic decision that you can make there. So what I'm taking from this is it's actually quite important. But before pressing wildcard, ask, could my saved free transfers solve the problem instead?
That's it, exactly, yeah, absolutely. Because if you've got 4 or 5 free transfers available, you can do major changes to your team and keep that wildcard for a later game week.
Right, lads. Okay, quick scenario here. I'm going to give you the situation. You give me the chip. Okay, Mick, 6 players I want to replace permanently.
I'll be using my wildcard for that.
Okay, Eamon, half my normal team has no fixture this week, but they're all perfectly good picks afterwards. What am I going to do? Yeah, I'd use it for free hits. If you've got players that are good and maybe they're not just playing the fixtures, then don't make any rash changes there. Mick, okay, my premium striker has had 2 brilliant home fixtures in recent game weeks. What should I be thinking?
For me, it'd be potential triple captain. If he's playing that good and he's got a good fixture coming up, that's what I'll be doing there.
Eamon, all 15 of my players have good fixtures. They're expected to start. It's not that about this. You could consider the bench boost there and get maximum points off the bench. And finally, lads, my team scored 31 points on Saturday. I'm extremely angry and I'm annoyed with it.
I wouldn't use any chip.
I think if I were you, I'd do some meditation and leave that there. Get that anger under control. Don't make any rash decisions while you're emotionally attached and involved with that game week. Excellent stuff. Well, I hope we've learned something from that now, and I hope our new managers, after listening, have picked up on that. I have a question here, though. What about stats versus actually watching the football? Mick, what do you make on that, though?
I like both of these, if I can say this. Stats tell you who's getting the shots, who's creating chances, and who's getting into dangerous areas. Watching the football match gives you the context then, so you can visually see the players going around there, and you can see their attitude. If they're on a team that's losing, are their heads gone down, or are they still battling under? So you see the visual side of things.
I always think that expected goals and expected assists are useful tools to have, but don't become a slave to them. Sometimes your eyes tell you something different than a spreadsheet might tell you there. Okay. Ownership and differentials then. I mean, where do we go with that? Well, the ownership is the information. It's not an instruction to you. So a player owned by 60 or 70% of managers can obviously hurt you if he scores and you don't own him. But that doesn't mean that every highly owned player is essential. Low ownership doesn't automatically mean somebody is a brilliant differential. If 2 or 3% of managers own somebody, there might be a reason for that there. You're saying he might be rubbish? He could be rubbish, yeah, he could be. So then we've got podcasts, you've got YouTube, you've got X, you've got websites, statistics, predicted teams. There's an immense wealth of information out there for managers. What do we do with all of that? I'd use it. It's brilliant to have. It's great to have that there. But ultimately, it's your decision.
Take in the information. That's what I say. Listen to the options and then pick your own team. There's nothing worse than making a transfer you didn't really want because you read about somebody else doing it or somebody predicted that this player was going to be great. So after everything we've discussed, new managers, transfers, formations, statistics, we've had the price changes, chips, ownership, captaincy. What's the easiest way to completely ruin a game week? Well, for me, it's miss the deadline.
And every season, somebody does this there. So you've spent 7 days planning. You have 2 transfers ready. Your captain selected, bench organised, and suddenly
the deadline's passed about 2 minutes ago. There, you didn't save in the changes there.
Okay. Other potential slip-ups. Say the captain. He could be injured, and you didn't take note of that. Vice captain.
Well, so he probably could be benched, not playing. You need to keep an eye and see, What's happening with those lads there?
The first substitute on your bench. I'd say probably he's suspended, he's not playing, or maybe manager is not picking him. Okay, well look, welcome back to fantasy football by the sounds of things. You don't have to make it complicated. I was getting lost there with some of this, but it's good to hear. It's good to hear. There we have it. So we've touched on Mayo, All-Ireland champions, and Sam Maguire is back in Mayo after 75 years. And Sam Maguire, by the way, folks, is a cup, just in case if anybody was thinking that the Mayo team brought some man called Sam Maguire back. They didn't. Half of Mayo, or maybe most of Mayo, were still celebrating there. Hector may or may not be sitting in the hot seat at the weekend. We'll have to wait and see there. We've got 9 Premier League clubs with new managers. We've got new signings, new systems, new roles, new players all to consider. And don't forget, you have 5 free transfers to bank. And we've got 8 chips to manage across the season there. Eamon, I recall you saying in episode 2 of this season's podcast that you questioned if the Arkham Avengers League was fit for purpose, and you spoke about new blood. Yes, I did. Yeah, that's right. I did say about that. I think I was saying that I thought the league had got stale. Some of the managers that are in it, they're just coasting along. You're not getting the effectiveness from them there. Yeah, I did. Yeah, yes, and I did say that it probably could do with some new blood. Well, Eamon, you're going to be pleased to learn that for 26-27, at the time of recording this show, there's no less than 3 new managers in the Arkham Avengers League. Firstly, we have Brian G with his Ballydung FC team. We have Damo. Yes, listeners, this is the very same Damo who was in the doghouse over Britain's Got Talent, the final, a couple of weeks back there. Oh, Damo, this is going to be very interesting. So he's gone from the doghouse to managing. This is a turn up for the books there. Yeah, and you know what? He decided to join the league, and he has a co-manager with him, and his co-manager is Owen, and Owen is going to assist him through the trials and tribulations of the season, and their team is called the Dubs of Hazard. So, lads, you're very welcome there. And we have Emma Kate, and her team is called Pitch Perfect. So look, I'd like to give a big welcome to all of our new managers. We wish them best of luck, and we look forward to seeing how they get on and how they perform over the 38 game weeks there. It's really great to hear this, I have to say. Look, somebody out there, and I'm touched with this, they were listening to me when I said we need a new blood, and look, some of them have decided, Eamon, it says we need new blood, I'm going to get in there. So it's great to see the new managers in there, and I'm looking forward to their season ahead. And if there's one thing I would say to them is at least be proactive. Don't be like some of our existing managers or our previous managers who seem to have put a team together and then forgot that they were managers.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have these managers with us. I just want to welcome everyone, and it just goes to show, look, the Arkham Avengers League, it's far from over, Eamon. It's growing.
Yeah, it is growing. It's good. I'm glad. And, I'm glad to say we need a new blood. We've got new blood. Oh, so, Eamon, you're taking kudos for that. Well, we've got new blood, so I'm saying no more. There's still time for any manager out there who would like to join us. Look, just send me an email with your name, team, your location, and you'll find yourself in the Arkham Avengers League, where Eamon, Mick, and hopefully Hector will be putting you under the microscope to see how your managing skills and strategies are paying dividends. Can I ask a question there? Yes, sure, Eamon. Ask. How many of our regular managers have come back? And I only ask this because I'm just thinking of some of those managers who are a little bit wishy-washy. I'm not going to dress this up here. I'm thinking of the like of Tweedledee and Tweedledum, who've put a team together and then make a hames of the whole lot of it. And I think listeners will know who I'm getting at that. And I'm not talking about the spoofer now. I'm not. I'm talking about some of these managers who sometimes sit down near the bottom of the table for most of the season. As it stands, and this is at the time of recording, Jerry is back, Connor, Ryan, Sean, Owen, Grania, Teresa, Bobby is there, Mirza, and of course the spoofer is back himself. So we've pretty much got all the regulars back there. I see. Okay. All right. Okay. I thought maybe one or two of them might have taken early retirement, but looks like we're stuck with them for another season. Okay. Well, look, that's how it is. Well, look, Eamon, where would you be without them? You'd have nothing to talk about. Don't worry about that. I'd have plenty to talk about, so I would. There's no fear that I'd run out of words. All right. Okay. Okay, folks. Thanks very much, Eamon, Mick. Pleasure to have you on the show, and thanks very much for coming in today. And Mick, I nearly forgot about this. The Camino walk. How did that go?
Oh, well, look, if I'm being very honest, I didn't actually walk that far because when I got out there, people were celebrating. There was Irish people out there and they were celebrating with all Ireland. So I kind of got waylaid in some of the places. So I didn't do as much walking as I wanted to. So, it was all exciting over there. Some of the establishments, especially with the Irish out there, they were just loving it. And I got tired up on that. And the Camino walk, I put it off until maybe later in the year. I might go back, maybe November time, October, November, and I might walk twice as far just to make up for it there.
All right, okay. But you had a good time over there.
Oh, it was a great crack altogether. I remember I met this fella called Miguel. Oh, Miguel and Francesco, and oh gosh, they were, they were loving it. That the Irish, they were wearing. One of them I think was wearing a Kerry jersey, and the other one managed to find a Mayo jersey from someplace. And we were great crack all together. And we met. Who do we meet? We met Donlands from somewhere over in Balmullet there, and we met Buskowski's as well. They're over in Westport, I think it was there. I met loads of people there. Some of them had said, they'd love to have gotten back to Ireland, but they didn't make it there. So it was like, I can only just imagine what it was like in Mayo with the celebrations, because I'd say it was like mini Mayo over there.
Okay. All right, okay. That's interesting to hear. That's interesting. Okay, folks. Well, look, we've packed a lot into this show, but I think maybe we've covered some interesting topics for both new and existing managers. The panel here, we would like to wish all the managers, not just in this Arkham Avengers League, but all the leagues around the world, the best of luck, and may the best managers win. We'll be back with the next show, and on it we're going to have a look at how our managers have kicked off the new season with Game Week 1, and we'll be taking a look to see who's out of the traps real quick, who got their team selection right, who didn't, who surprised us, and who do we think might be a dark horse. So that's all in the next show there. So all that remains for me to say is take care of yourselves wherever you are in the world. Have a good day, a good week. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks very much for subscribing. Spread the word. Tell your friends that we're here. We'll be back. Slán.